Okay, so I wanted to make a video about this. There are times where I don't want to talk about Plan B because sometimes it's a waste of time, and there are times when I do. In particular, in a situation like this, he has like 116 views, 9,000 people like this post. I didn't check yet. He blocked me, so I going to check later the comments, but I'm sure they're all clueless comments. Uh, no, so he's using. So one of the arguments that we are using against the S2F model is that is something that I came up with, right? And so basically, it's responding indirectly. Some argue I am the one argue, and other people agreed on this, but I was the first one bringing it up. So some argue, me, that there is no power law between Bitcoin price and SWF because a bunch of clusters are not scaling variant. That is incorrect. No, it's absolutely correct, Plan B. You are ignorant. I'm sorry. I say that I was not going to insult people, but you deserve, it's not an insult. It's a description of what you are. You don't know power laws. You have no clue. You didn't have clue before you copied me, and you don't have any clue now. You copied from my post in 2018, and this shows it's absolutely evidence that you had no clue before and you have no clue now. He's bringing up these clusters, and in a moment I'm going to show you his cluster. They are completely different. These are separate fitting through the data, absolutely separate fitting. In fact, one could use this as what he did, uh, actually worse, because much worse. So this is why I make this post, because this shows his complete absolute ignorance, and not just ignorance, how fake and uh, as a scammer. He's a scammer. At this point, he's a scammer. And yes, I know that people think I am angry, etc. In a sense, I am, because I hate people using knowledge and using something profound as this to actually spread ignorance. We don't need this ignorance. We need knowledge. Okay. So imagine each of these clusters was just a blob, a complete blob, no correlation in between the points. And then imagine somebody drawing a line through these blobs, okay, and say this is a power law. This is what Plan B did. Completely different from this. These are three different regions where this principle, this power law applies, and you will not be able to fit one single power law through this data. You see how problematic that will be? And imagine, in fact, you will get a completely different power law if you did it with this data. Imagine fitting a line through all this data. You will get something completely different. You can always fit a line through anything. Okay? You ask the computer, fit a line, it will fit a line. Okay? And probably you will get even a good R square, because when you have basically this work almost like 3 points, right? Because there are three regions. And you have three regions that are relatively separated like that, and you draw a line, he will be relatively good coherence, because there is a trend there, right? There is a trend. There is these clusters go up. What do they describe? They describe it. If you add an animal, in fact, there are some. Look at the turtle, for example. It's very interesting because it tells us a lot of things about power laws and how Plan B has absolutely no clue about what power laws are. And he based his entire S2F model enforcing, ensuring a power law through the data. I didn't see this. I missed it because, uh, you know, he blocked me, so I don't see regularly his post. I was doing some search for something, and I found this post. Okay, it's garbage, and millions of people are following him. 100,000 people look at this, and, and 1,000 agree that this there was some knowledge here. No, actually, this proves exactly the opposite. It shows exactly the opposite. So this is the famous Kleber's law. Let me explain for a moment what this is, because it's actually interesting. We can learn something from this, and this gives me a chance to tell how you should not follow this guy for two reasons. One, he's spreading garbage, he doesn't know even his own model. He doesn't understand his own model. Three, he has bad intentions because through negligence, because he's ignorant, or on purpose. Okay, and both of them are bad. So he's a very bad actor in the space. I don't talk about people like that often in this very, very strong way. Okay, we can have differences, etc. But Plan B really is like is plagiarize my model from the start. I gave him some benefit of the doubt, but now I think he's really an incredible bad actor. At a minimum, he's ignorant and he doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay, so let's explain this diagram. This diagram is something that I use often in my explanation of the power law. Okay, and it talks about the relationship between the size of an animal and the metabolism of an animal. Okay, and often what is shown is only that first the straight line that you see on top. This is a power law. Okay, in fact, these are three different power laws. They have similar slopes because you see the slope of the lines is similar. They are parallel lines, but we have different y-intercept because, and this why they are shifted down, right? As you go to simpler organisms. So it's actually in a very interesting graph, and it tells us a lot of information. These are all power laws. You can recognize power laws by being straight line in a log graph. You take the log of a metabolism in this case, you take the log of a mass. So what is going on? Why we see three different clusters? Because the metabolism of these animals are very, very different. What is going on mostly these are mammals, the first group. Then it seems to be mostly simpler creatures in terms of evolution. You have turtles, that are basically are reptiles. You have frogs, that are basically amphibians, then all the way to insects. Okay, very interesting. And all these animals, one characteristic of these animals is cold blood, right? They don't have, mammals have represent a jump in evolution because somehow we came up with this idea of having hot blood. It gives us more mobility, we are more active, we have a higher metabolism. So take, for example, two animals of similar size, these really, really large reptiles, like some of the turtles. There are some turtles are so big that are as big as some of the mammals, right? If you have two animals, one is a reptile and the other one is um, a mammal, the mammal, given the same weight, will use more energy. So you see, go up, take the same mass, go up, and you see the two animals will sit on two different lines. And that is the reason, right? There is a different metabolism um, for the mammals. That means, given the same weight, they consume more energy, and they do it. They pay this price because that gives them more mobility. In fact, they can go and eat reptiles. The reptiles will not be able to react fast enough, or if there is a rainy day or it's cold, or even, for example, at night, the reptile will be mobilized, but the mammals can go around and hunt for reptiles. So it's a price that we pay as mammals, but we get something out of it, right? And same thing happens when you go to this much simpler organism, where they don't even have blood. They don't. They are much simpler, and so they use less energy, right? Maybe we can say that in a sense they are more efficient because given the same weight, they can use more energy, less energy. But of course, right, they are more sluggish. They don't have a higher nervous system that allows them to understand the environment, to process information, etc. So it's a trade-off. Um, but basically, they are different reals. And when they produce these graphs, they don't take the data from the other real. They just take it within this particular boundary, and then they fit and they create this straight line. Okay. And so why what he's saying is complete absolute garbage. Not even a student. If he was my student, I will fail him. I mean, why people listen to somebody that is an ignorant banker that doesn't have anything to do with math like this? He will not be able to explain absolutely what is going on with this graph. He's an ignorant. What is his business, right? I mean, everybody can do it. Okay, of course, you can be an amateur and you can have knowledge and know what you're talking about. But when you are using math and you're trying to convince thousands and thousands of people that you know what you're talking about and you are absolute ignoramus, then you have no business. Okay, and if people hear this and figure, oh, Giovanni's angry. I have all the right to be angry. He's spreading misinformation and ignorance about the topic that is very important to me. So he has no business to talk about power laws. So these are three separate clusters, you can say. But first of all, there is inner coherence. Like, for example, in his cluster, in a moment, I will show you his cluster. His clusters, the clusters in his S2F are uncorrelated with the price. Here, you can see correlation between mass and metabolism within the cluster. In his case, there is no correlation. So this will be an example where there are three clusters. First of all, you will not still draw a single power law like he did. He does all kind of mathematical felony, right? This a friend of mine that is an astrophysicist, he called S2F a statistical felony. This is actually a mathematical felony, even more basic. Okay, he doesn't know, he doesn't understand even how to fix something. He's claiming that we could feed something through this data. We could not. This is what he does, because these are three separate cases, and you can, and the reason we are plotted in the same graph is to show how they compare. They have different y-intercept that I just explained the meaning of them, and they have similar slope. So even within that group, even if there is a shift in the amount of energy that every animal uses, the scaling works in the same way across all these animals. But it's a completely different situation from what he's describing. Nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do. It's like I'm 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 showing you two things that they seem somehow connected, and the connection is nowhere at all, right? And I will have to think about some stupid example, right? uh, there is absolutely no connection between his situation, my criticism of his situation, and this. Actually, in a sense, this proves exactly the opposite. It shows how, if you have different regimes, you will still have coherence in between the data points, and you can see they form separate power laws, and then you can plot them in the same graph to show, look, there are different regimes. It could happen with Bitcoin, for example, right? Let's say we go to a different regime where something else happened and there is like a sudden shift, and then the growth continues. Something like that could happen to Bitcoin, but it's not what is going on right now with Bitcoin, and for sure it's not what is going on with this data. Let me show his data so you understand how much different, basically the opposite of what is happening here is happening with S2F, and shows how it should not talk about this stuff, because this shows, imagine this was an exam or was some kind of he goes and gets some kind of professional testing for his knowledge about this topic. He will fail. People will laugh at him, literally laugh at him. This shows how ignorant he is on this topic. Okay, let me stop. Okay, so let's talk about uh, the situation with his data, right? So to summarize, um, and this really, really, more I think about, more it pisses me off, because again, maybe I don't understand how this guy works, but at this point, I'm not going to give him any more the benefit of doubt. I think he's really, at a minimum, he's not understanding what he's talking about, and he pretends to be an expert, um, and that it's almost to me as worse as somebody that understands what he's talking about and is faking it or is giving him false information on purpose. There is no really difference. Many people can be scammers simply because they do scammy things without even realizing it, right? They give false information. The result is the same. The result is absolutely the same. So he's using math and physics and this, I suppose, higher understanding of Bitcoin, and is an ignorant. He's really doesn't have a knowledge and understanding from a mathematical point of view, from a physical point of view, to discuss these things. So I don't understand why people still follow him. They like fake things, presented in a certain way. They like the dream, but they like fake knowledge. And to me, Bitcoin is the opposite of fake knowledge. It should be all based on real knowledge, on real understanding. If we are wrong on something, then we need to correct it. We need to improve our understanding. We can, all of us can be wrong. But if you continue to push something simply because you have an interest, and people think that Plan B doesn't have an economical interest. He has an economical interest. Where there are 2 million people following your account on X, on YouTube, etc., you make money out of that. And plus the possible investors, like he told me, as investors, people that think he's knowledgeable in this field, he has no clue what he's talking about S2F itself, okay, because he's making a model and he doesn't know what he's doing. And that is the best possible interpretation, and it could be much worse. It's possible that he's pushing this thing on purpose, knowing what he's doing and knowing that he's a fake model. Okay, so I put here the Kleber's law that he says it's a bunch of clusters. First of all, it's not even a bunch of clusters. It's really, I say that myself in part one. It's not really. It's three regions, three realms. We can call them three. Three regimes where the Kleber's law still holds. And the main difference between the laws uh, for each regime, it's a shift, an overall shift in energy. So every time we have this shift, this group of animals or organisms use more energy proportionally to the previous group. But the overall structure, the overall growth, the relationship between mass and metabolism stays the same. That is incredible and fascinating and beautiful. It's one of these things where if you understand power laws, it goes beyond understanding Bitcoin itself, because it allows you to understand life in general and the world, etc. So, to me, as a scientist, what he's saying is so huge misinformation that it needs to be corrected. And I don't care what people say, if they think that I'm negative or I'm putting down somebody else. When you say wrong things in science, you should be corrected. And this is what he's doing here. He's saying really, really wrong things. Okay, so he's not able to explain. These are not three clusters, there are three regimes. And in each regime, the relationship between mass and energy is kept intact, and there is a relationship. Okay, now let's compare what he's trying to peddle to people and misinform and amplify ignorance instead of knowledge, and with my criticism about what is happening with this data. So what I did here, I went to the essence of things, because this, as physicists, we always look at the essence of a fundamental meaning of things instead of, complicated things. We go to the simplest possible thing. So S2F as a measure is complicated because you are that is one of the problems with S2F in general. You are taking the change in supply, that is basically issuance times time. Then there is a jump in issuance because there are these halving, and then it continues, right, to have a supply continues to grow as issuance times time, right? But and then you divide that by issuance itself. It's a funny measure because you're calculating this issuance times time divided by time. So in the beginning is only time, and then because there is, you could call it a regime shift. There is a reduction in issuance by a factor of two, but it's basically very similar to what happened before. It's basically issuance times time plus a constant. That is part of the problem with this stupid measure, because nothing really changes. It's just exactly like before, but now everything is shifted by a factor of two. There is not really, there is not really. You could think there is a relationship with this, because you say, well, everything now is shifted up or down. It doesn't matter by a particular value, but it's not. It's not the. Um, it's not the uh, y-intercept that is changed. In fact, that could be interesting if there was such a shift in y-intercept. Then we will see actually something maybe if it looks like that, right? We will see that there is correlation, strong correlation within one of the clusters, and then there is a sudden shift, and then there is still correlation between within that cluster, and then another jump, and basically we will see something that looks like this. But this is not absolutely what it's doing, and like I say, anyway, even if that happens, it will not still try to fit all these clusters with one single power law, because the power law that you will get will not be a power law. Will be three different power laws, and you can say, okay, I need to fit it within every cluster. I found a power law. There is a particular behavior. When we jump, we still get the same slope. And you can even technically, because we know exactly what, if it was some regime like that, like I say, it's nothing like that. It's nothing like that. But imagine Bitcoin behaving that way, right? Every time there was um, an halving, and now we know what caused the shift, and we could calculate what is the shift, and maybe it's consistent shift. Here, for example, the shift is not consistent with the animals. It's not. You can see that there is less of a change when we go from the unicellular organism to the reptile. There is a huge paradigm shift when we go to the mammal, because they did represent a huge paradigm shift. But you could measure it and still try to compare it, try to make a model every time there is a shift. Hopefully, the shift lasts for a long time and so on. But it's absolutely not what is happening here. Look at this; it's completely different. And first of all, it's trying to explain one single phenomenon. Like again, it will be a felony to try to draw one single power law that describes all these different regimes, even for the animals. So he's saying, oh, I could do that. You see, the people did it here. No, they didn't. No. Look, these are three different lines. See, I don't know. I mean, anybody that looks at this, he will understand, right? If he has an understanding, an intuitive, powerful understanding of what power laws are, of how they work, of scale invariance, he will never say something stupid like this. This is almost like a child trying to explain sex or something that he doesn't understand in his little understanding of the world. To me as a scientist, this shows he's much more ignorant and much more ignoramus, and he doesn't understand the concept at all. In fact, I'm very glad with posted this, because it shows exactly what everything I told you, that he's not an expert, that he doesn't understand, that he's not a good reference. You should not really listen to this guy. It's nothing personal. There is nothing personal. I would love that he was another important, he's talking about power laws. Will be amazing, right? He's saying that S2F is a power law. Okay, look, another power law in Bitcoin. There are all these power laws. Great contribution. And you know why? And why I actually know all the things I know about S2F, because I started with that attitude. I wanted to understand it better so I could use it in my arguments. Look, there is even S2F, this important quantity, etc. It's a power law, blah blah blah. And then when I started to study, I realized it was garbage. There is nothing there. And this is why I'm so strong with it. And when I talk with him and I try to tell him, look, unfortunately, the power law that you're describing is not a power law. There is not a power law there, and there is in fact not even connection between price and S2F. He started to attack me and be upset with me, and finally blocked me. So this is the story behind it. But anyway, let's look at his the data, right? So this is issuance. So instead of looking at S2F, that is this more complicated quantity that is made by issuance anyway, let's look at issuance itself, because we want to understand if there is any relationship between the change in issuance, so how many coins are produced, and um, the price of Bitcoin. And this was my argument that really it looks like there are four clusters. Now, I don't have the most recent data. If I add the most recent data, you will see another cluster here. But the same thing happens. Okay, the same behavior. So this is the cluster. It's a real cluster. There is not really it's a blob. This is why I call it a cluster, right? So there is a blob here, a blob here, a blob here. They're all blobs. Blobs means, for anybody that understands data analysis, that there is no correlation between the data points, between issuance itself within that group and the price. So between the halving, this data shows clearly there is absolutely no correlation between them. Okay, the issuance and the price are not related. There are some days before we had the first halving, where we went from producing more than 10,000 bitcoins a day to half of that, and so it's even less than half of that. So that is even a bigger change that we get when we have the halving, and the price was not affected, because you see it's all over the place. There are data points where so remember what these dots represent. Each dot represent how many coins were produced in a day and the price. So take any dot here where we had so you see the way to read this is 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 4,000, right? So maybe 5,000, right? 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. Okay, so we have some days where we produce less than 5,000. Say, take this dot here. Then you can go all the way where we were more than 10,000 coins produced, and the price was similar, was the same. So that shows that there is no, that how many coins you produce per day doesn't really affect the price. The price doesn't care. And so this is why you have these blobs. See how different it is here, where every regime has a very strong power law, has like a mini power law, has its own power law that have the same slopes. And then there is a shift, okay, and that changes the slope of the power law, but everything stays the same. Here you have nothing, and you see the jump simply because there is a reduction in production, and that jump in the production creates a fake trend. It's not a trend. It's a trend in the sense that as the price goes up, we add this halving that reduce the amount of coin produced. But I could use the number of people that follow the World Cup, and that also went up over the years, over these 15 years. Every 4 years it goes up, and I could make a graph like this showing that there is a correlation between the number of soccer viewers, soccer World Cups, soccer final, whatever it is, and the price of Bitcoin. They will look like they are correlated, but it's a fake correlation. It's a meaningless correlation. Same thing here. See, because if it was a correlation, then within the clusters, there will be this trend, exactly like here. You see, what is trying to show, in fact, illustrates how bad this data is. You will see if there was a real correlation between like metabolism and mass, before you change regime, you will see correlation. But there is not. You see how these dots are completely all over the place. No correlation. Then there is a jump, right? Then the jump will show a power law that is still a power law. It works. There is a correlation between them, and it would just jumped. But you will still not say, "Oh, let me draw a single line that connects all these regimes," because the slope that you will get for that power law will be fake. It will not mean anything. It will not be a power law, because a power law needs to be a general trend. Now you could do what you could do. You could um, make a model that is made of single power laws in between of the halvings, or you could detrend it. You could say, let me calculate the equivalent if I made one single regime, right? You will make something a little bit more complicated to show there is an overall power law trend. But not for sure trying to draw one single power law, wet slope, the y-intercept, it will be meaningless. It will be meaningless. It will not represent the overall behavior of a system. Like imagine I do the same thing with the animal. I draw a line that connects all these. It will go through these groupings, and it will be a slope that is. You can even imagine. Like let's do it. Let's do it. Imagine I draw a line here that tries to feed this data. You see, it will look like something like this, right? And it will be completely different from the other power law. It will not have anything to do. It will not really be a power law because power law needs to be scaling variable. It means as you zoom in, it needs to look similar, right? And you can see the dots, the real data points. If I am here, I will not know anything about these other guys, right? So if I zoom here in this region and I look only at these data points, it doesn't know anything about the other data points. It will not be similar because, in fact, so imagine I can zoom here, right, in this region. The real power law will be this, and the overall power law will be that. So they are not the same. They are absolutely not the same. And that is the idea of having a power law, but it doesn't matter how you zoom in, you will still see the same type of behavior. That is what scaling variance means. If I zoom in this cluster, I will see that power law. I will know, and that power law here, that will be the real power law that connects all these data points, will not be equal to the blue line. So the blue line doesn't represent anything. It's not an average. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's a fake connection between these three different events that they or regions, and the only way to interpret it is there are three different regions. There is not really a simple way of describing the overall behavior. This will be an incredible felony, okay, to do mathematically and logically. You will not be able to do this. This is also something that I argue, for example, with Fred. He was looking at Microsoft, where first of all they are exponential. Every single behavior. One day we can have a video about that. It's made of three regions. One is an exponential, Microsoft. Another one is flat, and another one is another exponential. Okay, you can draw a line through them and say that is a power law, but it's meaningless. Okay, and I don't know why they did it. I don't want to say anything personal, but that is another story. But with the uh, plan B, it's really crazy that he's saying that you can do it. This is what he's proposing, right? He say, "Oh, I could do this with this guy." No, you could not do it. If you did it, people will laugh at you, and you will never be able to publish a paper or anything like that. People will know, like you doing that, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. Okay, it's absolutely nothing. Uh, okay, so I'm trying to make it bigger so you can actually see. It's not a meaningful approach in trying to draw a line like that. But here, the beauty of this is that actually you do have coherence between the class, not cluster, but the regimes. Here you don't have even that. So it's much worse. It's much meaningless. This thing is completely meaningless. It's a clear evidence there is no um, correlation between price and issuance within each regime, and you shoehorning this red line through it because you can always do it and say, "Oh, where is this red line?" It's a meaningless red line. Yes, there is a pattern, because the pattern is that these things go up because the price is going up, and everything is shifting to the left because you have less and less issuance. But yeah, like my age is also growing with time as the price of Bitcoin grows with time. I'm not going to make the price of Bitcoin going up because I became older. It's completely absurd. It's completely absurd. And okay, you can think that this doesn't matter, who cares, etc. But if you care about understanding, if you care about using some of this model to guide you, if you don't understand that plan B is completely ignorant, he doesn't know literally what he's talking about, and not just that, he's not concerned about looking like a fool. because there are hundreds of thousands of people that don't get it. They don't understand the math. They don't understand the physics. They don't even try. They simply like, like all these 970 people that like this thing because, oh yeah, okay, Giovanni mentioned this thing. We didn't understand it, but we agree with whatever Plan B says because it's Plan B and it's telling us we are going to make $1 million in this cycle. And so whoever, like, at that point, why there are even people like this, right? If anything that they say, it's okay, whatever. So you should make memes. You should not try to talk about logs and math and knowledge. You should not do that. It's misinformation and ignorance. This is incredible. So please, try to understand who is. Try to understand yourself, because when try to read the Webu scale, try to learn some math, trying to use some logic, learn, grow as a person, because then you can discriminate. You can say, okay, there is this guy, he knows what he's talking about. Maybe I should follow him and understanding because he has good intention and plus he knows what he's talking about. And then there is this peddler of ignorance that is a bad influence in the space. Okay, so this is, it's amazing that he's actually made this post. This shows even more. I didn't realize that he really doesn't understand what he's talking about, and this shows this in a very powerful way. That is a bad influence in the space, a very, very, very bad influence. Okay, let me know if you have any questions and you want to discuss this further. But you can see how nonsensical what he's saying is. I hope you see.